Namaskar, friends. I'm sure that as a new sociologist, either as a PhD student or in the early stages of your academic career, you are looking for new issues and new topics and new theories. I wish to introduce a fascinating theory in sociology, and I wish to open a new area of research in Indian sociology, and that is by introducing sociology of emotions. Friends, the kind of society in which we live, our behavior is determined more and more by our emotions in this age of social media. No doubt, logic, reason, experimentation, rationality, whatever has been assumed behind human behavior in sociology is important. But emotions are playing an increasing and important role in human behavior. And the purpose of introducing this area or this subfield of sociology, sociology of emotions, is to emphasize this aspect, and that in human behavior, emotions are something not to be neglected. What are emotions? What are major theories of emotion? What are major traditions? And in what kind of areas or in what kind of empirical studies you can apply the sociology of emotions framework? This is the matter of these slides, this presentation. So I have around 20 slides to show, and I begin sharing with you my slides. The title of this presentation is Sociology of Emotions, a new subfield of sociology. Friends, this is certainly a new issue. And first of all, you would like to know, or I should tell you, what is emotion? Emotions refer to experience of happiness, joy, anger, fear, and sadness, upset. A fundamental shared experience that shapes and is shaped by society. This is a new realization. That's why this new area. Ignored so far because earlier sociologists, except Pareto, ignored emotions. Pareto also focused on logico-experimental reality and logically constructed fundamental categories of what he called sentiments and residues. Emotions are seen as antithetical to rationality, Max Weber's rationality, which has been a building block of structuralist or structural functional theory in sociology. Emotions have been initially ignored by symbolic interactionists also, who explored the micro-level interactions, as the emphasis of sociology has remained on cognitive processes. In the late 20th century, however, some sociologists and some social psychologists realized that cognition and emotions are inextricably tied, and emotions affect people's lives at individual, small group, and societal levels. Some possible research problems which I propose for you to study: nature and distribution of emotions in India. This is something that nobody has studied so far, and you can take up this issue, conceptualize emotions in Indian context and categorize them. You can use quantitative framework, you can use qualitative framework, anything that you want. And there is a reference to Turner. You can depend on Turner's work on emotions. Emotional management during certain activities which evoke or which might evoke very intense emotions. Imagine a medical person performing postmortem. Now here emotions are involved, and you can apply Hochschild's uh, concepts of surface acting and deep acting in sociology of emotion, concepts which were given by her in 1983. Then you can apply the sociology of emotions to emotional management, study of emotional management and self-esteem among health sanitation workers who are always conforming to emotional norms. So the concept of emotional norms, or managing through deep breathing. This is deep acting from Hochschild. Marriage, reproduction, interspousal negotiations, emotions play a very important role. Actually, the concept which will come on later, emotional burden or emotional labor, needs to be studied, and it's you will realize that this is a much more important concept in studying gender than the concept of domestic violence. You can also study emotional burden among women and SC/ST minority groups, especially among those who are socially mobile and come to occupy elite positions as executives, managers, administrative officers, CEOs, professors, surgeons, doctors in different organizations. And stages of impact, you can also study how disasters, communal riots, epidemics like COVID-19 are followed by certain stages of emotional expression and behavior. This has been done in some areas in the past. How do decision makers or judges, like I'm giving you the example of judges, but in general, how do people or decision makers decide against their conscience, feelings, and still follow the rules of emotions without becoming emotional deviant? And how social position matters in over or under evaluation of oneself, and what is its impact on emotions and finally on behavior. Study of sociology of emotions ultimately studies human behavior, but uses emotions as an intermediate variable or a mediating factor or moderating factor. What do sociologists of emotions do? They point out the importance of emotions in the lives of people at various levels, their interaction with thought and action, hypothesize that culture shapes emotions, a new realization. You may have thought that culture shapes only behavior, feeling, thinking, but culture also shapes emotions. And major contributors in this field are qualitative sociologists such as Hochschild, Short, Theids, and Clark. Sociologists of emotions apply dramaturgical approach of Goffman in day-to-day interaction and study emotions and action, the relationship between emotions and action. They study culturally shared emotional ideology. Have you ever imagined that there are emotional ideologies? As there are political ideologies, social ideologies, ideologies associated with groups and identities, there are also emotional ideologies, feelings, and display rules. They study traditional hypothetical deductive frameworks, or they apply traditional hypothetical deductive frameworks to explore emotions. They study who has the right to display emotions. Have you ever realized that all of us do not have the same right to display our genuine emotions in all situations? Emotions are for generalized others, sentiments for specific persons. I may be a sentimental person. But when it comes to emotions, expression of emotions, I cannot ignore the generalized others of Fule and Mead. Generalized others. Symbolic interaction is generalized others. This makes emotions a sociological issue. What are the theoretical roots? I'm reading from an article by Weed and Smith. It's a subfield of sociology intersecting psychology and neuroscience. So sociology, psychology, and neuroscience. Major contributors are qualitative researchers such as Hossail, who use inductive methods to develop new concepts to describe how social forces shaped our emotions. And there are three major traditions. Erving Goffman's dramaturgical approach and the concept of front and back stage in day-to-day interaction, the role of scripts, roles, scenes, acts, and audience, the terms coined by Goffman in the presentation of self in everyday life. Another tradition is to follow symbolic interactionist perspective. And so the perspective of social psychology. In 1978, Kemper published a social interactional theory of emotions. And the third tradition is tradition of studying group processes. What is the place of status, power, and justice in social exchange, and what are the stages of affect? This stages of affect has associated group processes theory to explore, to examine what are the different stages through which emotions arise, develop, get strengthened, and then weakened, and eventually die. There are multiple perspectives. Sociology, on every issue, there are multiple perspectives. There are varying meanings of emotion, affect, sentiment, mood, depending on one's theoretical stand. Examples of emotions for a lay person are emotions as pleasant or unpleasant, pride or shame, gratitude or anger, affective attachment or affective detachment. And I am proposing this area of study because all these things affect our behavior in different situations. In family, in political party, in bank, in classroom, in neighborhood, in temple, everywhere. Turner made a very important study in this field across cultures and identified 200 major emotions among people. 200 types of emotions. You can conduct a study of emotions in India. You may not find all 200 types, or you may find more types in India, or you may require a very different categorization to study emotions in India. Emotions, remember that emotions are not simply feelings. So I'm using this quote to distinguish between feelings and emotions. Feelings are physical sensations that are subject to cognitive interpretation. Then what are emotions? Emotions are states of feeling that can include the initial physical sensation, the cognitive appraisal of that sensation, the continued rumination on that feeling as it passes through consciousness, and the physical manifestation of that cognitive appraisal or the display. We treat more trans-situational long-term phenomena like moods, affect, sentiments, and so on, only as they are relevant for theoretical traditions that also involve feelings and emotions. A study of this provides hope for the future of emotion theory in sociology. I mentioned about a tradition of using Goffman's concept of front stage in studies of emotions. What is front stage? While in the front stage, people perform their roles by communicating in scripts and performing acts that consist of sequences of behavior and interaction. All performances unfold in a particular context or setting, the scene for a particular audience. Of course, no individual can present their public face every moment of every day. So our expressions of emotions depend on all these things. What is expected from us, what is our role, what is the script, what is seen, what is the context, what is the audience before whom we are expressing emotions, or we are among whom we are behaving in a certain manner, and all these things change from time to time, moment to moment. And obviously, then what is backstage? Backstage is when you are not part of society, and you are yourself, and you are experiencing and reflecting on your genuine emotions. Another important name in this field is hostile, and she wrote The Managed Heart, the commercialization of human feeling in 1983, through which she showed how human feelings get commercialized. If you want, you can also use the term commodified. She was a professor in California, and she studied how family, working parents, and flight attendants at 30,000 feet height manage emotions cognitively, bodily, and expressively. We have to manage our emotions, and this management of emotions happens or must happen at various levels: at the cognitive level, at the bodily level, and at expressive level. How people manage emotional response in line with emotional ideologies. So another concept, you can use this concept, emotional ideologies. As there are political ideologies, as there are social ideologies, there are also emotional ideologies, and we all subscribe to some or other emotional ideology, or to emotional ideology of the situation or condition or status to which we belong. Feeling rules, they are feeling rules and display rules, what she called the emotional ideology. She also made a difference between surface and deep acting. Surface acting is how our expressions are seen by others. What aspect of ours or self we show to others, and deep acting is what goes on inside, or internal management like deep breathing. To manage ourselves, sometimes to relax, we engage in deep breathing. That is deep acting. So surface acting, deep acting. She coined the concept of emotional labor, that people have to perform emotional labor. As we perform physical labor, as we perform mental labor, we also perform emotional labor. And this emotional labor benefits the employers, not us, but it benefits the employers. I will give an example. Attendants are paid for displaying emotions. And these feeling rules or ideologies may also depend on the status. So they depend not only on some norms, some rules, some guidelines, but these rules, norms, guidelines depend on our state. This is a quote from Hochschild. If I pretend, this is from the study of flight attendants. If I pretend I'm feeling really up, Sometimes I actually get into the passenger responds to me as though I were friendly, and then more of me responds back. This is surface acting. Sometimes I purposely take some deep breaths. I'm trying to manage myself. I try to relax my neck muscles. This is deep acting with the body. I try to remember that if he is drinking too much, he is probably scared of flying. People are scared of flying, especially the beginners. Uh, I think to myself, he's like a little child. This is cognition. Really, that's what he is. And when I see him that way, I don't get mad that he's yelling at me. He's like a child yelling at me then. This is deep acting. What I tell myself, what I show to others is surface acting, and what I tell to myself, or how I rationalize something or manage my emotions which should not be displayed, that is deep acting. Roxana Harlow gave the concept of emotional labor. I mentioned this in um, an earlier slide. Harlow investigated the impact of occupying an intersectional minority status on emotional management and emotional labor in the undergraduate college classroom. She asked a question to all the teachers uh, whether UG students had called their qualification in question. Now, interestingly, she found a difference according to race. Only 7% white professors feel that UG students had called their qualification in question. And 76% black professors feel that. That's why in right in the beginning, I said that this sociology of emotion is a very fertile area to study emotions, thinking, and behavior of those who are socially upwardly mobile, who belong to reserve category, and have come up to occupy top positions in different institutions. So these blacks are always conscious of the fact. 70% black professors feel that UG students had called their qualification in question. This puts uh, an extra burden on black professors. They must prepare extra. They must make an extra effort to leave the impression that they are good. So black professors require more emotional management, more emotional labor combined. So this Roxana Harlow combines identity theory, identity of being white or black, and affect control theory. Feeling that I am adequate or inadequate, and how do I control that feeling, or how do I behave myself so that I can get rid of an unwanted feeling of being inadequate. It combines management, emotional labor, and identity theory. So these black professors have to perform emotional labor for the sake of university, for the employers. Similarly, housewives uh, have to perform or have to take up emotional labor for maintaining the family or for children and husbands. So this emotional labor is a new concept which sociology of emotions has given us, and it can be applied to diversified fields in sociological studies in India. Jennifer Lewis uh, makes a study of uh, rescue workers, and the title of the work is uh, Heroic Efforts, the Emotional Culture of Search and Rescue Workers. The work was published in 2003. And in this book, Lois spent 6 years volunteering as part of a search and rescue team, documenting her own experience of emotional culture. through in-depth interviews and participant observation, yeah, the usual techniques of qualitative studies, Lewis finds evidence for separating out two new types of emotion management, tight and loose. How people, the question is how people manage others' emotions. Sometimes you have to manage others' emotions. Search and rescue workers had to manage others' emotions. Collaborative emotional management. Sometimes we need to collaborate in the emotional management of all of us. Rescue workers employ certain strategies to manage emotions of victims, and these strategies are of two types: tight or strict and loose. Tight or strict control is usually assigned to males, and loose, empathizing, expressing sympathy, and practicing active listening to females, often leading to deep bonds for some time till the work is on. Now, put yourself in an imaginary situation that a colleague of yours has failed in some exam, civil service exam, and he is in a very sad mood. You have to console, you have to manage his emotions. What will you do? Who can exercise tight control? Who can exercise loose control? Does it not depend on your status, whether you are a male or female, whether you are rich or poor, whether you are very close to that person or you are just an acquaintance or only a classmate or neighbor or a cousin? It depends. So you sometimes you use the strategy of tight control of emotions of others. Sometimes you use light control or loose control. Use only sympathy. You do not say much. You do not guide much, but you try to understand. You be with him. You be with her, and just convey that you are trying to understand his situation, her situation, and things will improve, and he or she should come out of that situation, that grief or sadness. Candace Clark in 1987 gave another concept in the field of sociology of emotion, and that is the concept of sympathy account. Have you ever realized that when you need somebody's sympathy or when you sympathize with someone, you are opening a sympathy account? It's like opening a bank account in which money can be credited or debited. It's a sympathy account. It's an account in which you can credit more money, you can withdraw money, and and Clark also talks of 4 rules of sympathy. Sympathy is a kind of politics, influencing others. Sympathy benefits the recipient. Clark says that sympathy benefits the recipient and obligates him or her to reciprocate in the future. So sympathy becomes a kind of politics that reduces the social position of receiver. Higher status people, therefore, may refuse to receive sympathy. You generally sympathize with people who are your equal or people who are below you. Imagine what will happen if a physical laborer attempts to sympathize with the CEO of the company which is constructing buildings and who met an accident or maybe some tragedy happened in his family, his son or his daughter or son-in-law, somebody died. Can you imagine that situation? Have you ever thought about it, that sympathies are exchanged mostly between equals. Otherwise, it becomes a politics. Crediting and debiting of sympathy becomes a politics. So the inferences are: do not make unwarranted claims to sympathy. Do not claim too much sympathy or accept it too readily. If you accept sympathy, then you are obligated to reciprocate in the future. That is why Clark is saying, do not make unwarranted claims to sympathy. And do not claim too much sympathy or accept it too readily. Otherwise, you are in debt. You are in debt. You have to reciprocate. You have to pay this debt at some other time to the person who is sympathizing with. Claim and accept some sympathy to keep sympathy accounts open. At the same time, I can say, to use a sociological term, social capital. To build relationships, to maintain social capital, you have to open sympathy account. If you become an indifferent man, an indifferent woman, if you are unaffected by what happens to all others, those connected with you, you neither receive any, you neither expect any sympathy from them ever, nor you show any sympathy towards them, then you do not open, you have not opened a sympathy account, and this will affect your social capital. Repay sympathy with gratitude, sympathy, or both. This is the rule, a rule of exchange of sympathy. Sympathy account, beautiful concept. You can apply this concept of sympathy account in studying some Indian social phenomena. Sympathy is one thing, and in studies of emotions in general, Peggy Thoits extended two-factor theory of Schacter, combining bodily response. Emotions has a bodily response, and emotional response also depends on the situation. So situational cues are important, and that leads to the cognitive appraisal of situation. So Thoits, Peggy Thoits started with two-factor theory of Schacter, who tried to combine bodily response and situational cues, and added another dimension of cognitive appraisal. What it means that in studies of emotions, feelings or physiological or bodily aspects of sensations are important, feelings are important, but in addition, bodily response, different bodies, different people respond to same experience differently. Here lies the role of phenomenology of experience, phenomenology of pain. This pain defined samely by medical experts may be felt less severe or more severe by different subjects, by different patients. So body response, situational cues, and cognitive appraisal, all these things are mixed up. And Thoits gives the concept of emotional deviance, a beautiful concept. What is emotional deviance? Emotional deviance is not following the rules of expression of emotions. In all situations, all of us are governed by certain rules of expressing emotions. If we deviate from those, then we are emotional deviants. Emotional deviance is a discrepancy between emotional rules and expression, and focuses on how people change emotions at any stage. Thoits suggests that individuals engage in more noticeable emotional deviance. So if emotional deviance is important to your esteem, image, position, behavior, recognition, then there is a need to understand what explains emotional deviance. And Thieves suggests that emotional deviance can be more noticeable when, number one, people occupy multiple, generally contradictory roles. If you occupy contradictory roles, then there is a greater possibility of your being emotionally deviant. I remember a sociological theory of Lansky long back in Theory of Stratification. He said that those people who occupy consistent statuses are more likely to be conservative, and people who occupy inconsistent statuses in society are more likely to revolt or protest. Same is the case here with emotional deviance also. People with consistent status are less likely to be emotionally deviant, and people with contradictory roles or contradictory statuses are more likely to be emotionally deviant. They do not know how should they express their emotions, whether according to this status or that status. 2. Belong to two or more competing or contradictory subcultures. Undergo a major, because cultures define rules of the game, rules of expression of emotions. So emotional deviance also depends on whether you belong to two or more competing or contradictory subcultures. Long back, Sorokin talked about multiple egos in us, depending on the parts of society to which we belong. And if we belong to different and competing parts of society, conflicting parts of society, then there is more conflict in various egos that we have. Something similar in the context of emotions, Thieves say. 3. Undergo a major role transition due to personal or structural factors. Or 4. Are subject to especially rigid emotional constraints. There are theories of emotions which mostly talk of 4 things: physiological arousal, cognition, labeling the experience, and expression of emotions. So friends, emotions are complicated issues, and I feel like talking about Buddhist theory of mental processes in this theory of emotions. Maybe sometime I will make a video on that. That there is an experience. There is a experience. Then this is followed by cognition. Cognition depends on our cognitive abilities, on our memory, past experiences, past interpretations, and several things. And then on the basis of that, we label our experience. And labeling then leads to expression of emotions. So between experience and expression of experience in emotional form, several stages are involved, and these are 4 major stages. There is an identity theory in sociology of emotion, a major theory, which takes emotions to be the central aspect of our behavior. And in this theoretical framework, Sheldon Stryker argues that the strength of emotional reactions helps to signal the importance of a particular identity, ordering and reordering of identities in an individual salience hierarchy, and affecting their commitment to different identities. There is also Burke's identity control theory, which was first delineated in the early 1990s. It focuses on how individuals process their roles in relation to their context and how this process shapes their social behavior. Identity in identity control theory has four components. Identity standard, what it means to be oneself in a particular situation. Input, how one sees oneself in the situation based on feedback from others. Comparator, a comparison between the input and the standard, an ideal, and output. The difference between the ideal identity enactment and the individual's perception of others' judgment of their identity enactment. It appears as though I am talking of Cooley and Mead's symbolic interactionist theory. David Sees on affect control also says something interesting. Affect control theory is situated between self-enhancement and self-discrepancy theory. In that, it predicts that one, individuals will feel positive emotions when positively deflected and negative emotions when negatively deflected, self-enhancement consistent. But two, individuals are driven to conform their identities and conform to culturally shared understandings in order to facilitate social interaction. And three, when individuals confirm their identities, they feel emotions fitting with that identity. There are other issues in this field on which sociologists have worked, the small group context. And however, this area has been rather neglected by sociologists. Some people have written on this. You can make a very good pioneering contribution on studies of emotion in diverse settings in the small group context. Role of power and status, inequality in house and its effect on emotions of family members. Kemper has studied this. You can also study this. This will add to literature on gender bias and domestic violence. How does power and status, means inequality in household matters, in household behavior, in household context, affect emotions of family members, different family members, father, mother, grandfather, grandson, sister, brother, and so on, males, females. Overbenefiting and overcontributing lead to guilt and anger respectively. Sometimes overbenefiting leads to guilt, that a feeling that I exploited the others. Overcontributing may lead to anger sometimes. Am I a fool? I did so much for him, and what did I get in return? Overcontribute. I overcontribute, or I overcontributed to the cause of nationality. What did I gain? I did more efforts than I did more efforts in teaching and research and administration in my university as compared to my colleagues. What did I get? Did I get anything extra? No. I got the same salary. And this kind of feeling in some people can lead to anger toward themselves and anger toward the system. Then rituals in interaction. If people succeed in rituals, there is happiness. So there is a connection between rituals and feeling, rituals and emotions. This is an area not yet explored. What is the relationship between rituals and interaction? Rituals and emotions. In different interactive situations, you are supposed to follow certain rituals. Rituals in family building, marriage, kinship, childbirth, death, uh, rituals in like opening ceremony, uh, laying founding stone of the building, and so on. There are rituals, and if people succeed in rituals, they feel happy. Otherwise, they feel sad. So that means our feeling happy or feeling sad is closely associated with rituals. Actually, sociology of emotions connects our emotions to various aspects of society. Social structure, status, role, power, inequality, esteem, experiences, self-images, everything that sociologists study. And as I said in the beginning, then emotions, feeling good, feeling bad, happy, unhappy, anger, guilt, etc., etc., they serve as some kind of mediating variables between our experiences, our actions, and our subsequent behavior. So, friends, I can conclude by saying the same thing in this slide in a more formal way, that there is a complex relationship between social structure, environment, status and power, emotions, identities, feeling depressed or anxiety. So that means study of sociology of emotions can also help us in studies of mental disorders. It can greatly help us in study of mental disorders. And since our academic community is showing a greater concern about studies of mental disorders or mental health, study or including ideas and concepts from sociology of emotions in study of mental health and mental disorders can help us a lot. Evaluation, good or bad, our evaluation, powerful or powerless, and activity, slow or fast. We perceive ourselves to be powerful or powerless or active as fast or slow. Our perception affects our emotions. And Coolidge looking glass self or meets generalized others, these concepts are certainly very important concepts. And finally, all this affects our behavior. These are some references. My presentation is based largely on this Weed and Smith-Lovin's article, but it will be very useful to read Thieves Peggy's Sociology of Emotions, Hochschild's The Man is Heart, a social interaction theory, Harlow's Race Does Not Matter, but race matters. In our context, caste does not matter, but religion does not matter, but minority status does not matter, but we need studies of this kind. Unfortunately, because of the greater influence of anthropology on sociology in India, we have ignored these topics. And these topics were raised mostly in late 20th century. Now it is time for Indian sociology, young sociologists, to take up studies of sociology of emotion and explain human behavior more adequately in terms of these things. So, friends, this is what I wanted to say. I wanted to introduce a new subfield or a field of sociology, which may be called sociology of emotion, a field developed in late 20th century, and which requires more studies, more explorations, greater theorization, inclusion of concept from neuroscience, from psychology, from phenomenology, from philosophy, anthropology, political science, etc., etc., in terms of which we can explain human behavior more adequately and more fully. And if you are not interested in the in various theories in the field of sociology of emotion, at least you can pick up one or two major concepts: emotional labor, emotional burden, emotional deviance, identity, sympathy account. Sympathy account is a very important concept, and you can apply this concept of sympathy account to study social capital among university students, university professors, staff, among doctors, among politicians, among traders, or in the neighborhood, in the community setup. This sympathy account opens door for a very novel and new type of research. Then emotional labor, and right in the beginning, I said that those people who are upwardly mobile, who come from, say, reserved categories and have moved up to higher levels in society and occupy top positions in different institutions, they have to do more of emotional labor than others. They have to do more of labor. This labor is not simply physical labor. This is not mental labor. This is a very different kind of labor which arises from a feeling that the others do not consider me to be that competent, that adequate as these others are. So the concept of emotional labor can produce very good results. Then study of emotions, emotional labor, emotional burden, deep acting, surface acting, and the strict control, weak control, or loose control. These are some concepts which can contribute to studies of gender, caste, community, religion, communal relationships, politics, and so on. I personally found some concepts of sociology of emotion very fascinating, and therefore I thought that let me make this video. Maybe some students will be attracted towards applying these concepts in their future thesis, or some early academicians, early sociologists may be interested in learning more about sociology of emotion and applying these concepts of emotional burden, labor, front stage, back stage, tight control, loose control, etc., or sympathy account in diverse kinds of studies, in diverse fields of research in sociology. Thank you very much.